Man, 3 weeks ago, we talked up some trade targets that could help you win your league. That led us to some breakout players like Chris Olave and Travis Etienne, who's looking really good now. Alvin Kamara, who a lot of people were panicking on, and Jamar Chase. People were panicking on Jamar Chase. And now we're going to be talking about some more trade targets, players that we think could break out for you here in the second half. This is the home stretch going into your fantasy football playoffs and make a big impact for you. Welcome to the Pretend GM Fantasy Football Show. It's episode 6. I am Alfredo Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at the Pretend GM, and I am joined by not Dr. Vig. I am joined by Dave Kluge of the famed Footballguys. You can follow him on Twitter at Dave Kluge. And Dave, I'm going to start you off with a fastball right down the middle, sir. We got the big news. Christian McCaffrey traded from the Carolina Panthers to the San Francisco 49ers. Is Christian McCaffrey a trade target for you, or is he someone that maybe you're selling?
Well, I think that's such a loaded question because I think that if the question was, did Christian McCaffrey's value go up? Absolutely. But because of that, I don't know if he's necessarily a trade target at this point, because now how can you not put him as the unanimous running back 1 overall? I mean, so you got to really pay up for him. I mean, I don't even know how you can go out and acquire Christian McCaffrey right now, whether it be dynasty or redraft. You would have to sell the farm to get him, with Breece Hall now going down with an ACL. Likely ACL, might be out for the season. He's out of the picture. Jonathan Taylor, he's been having a pretty disappointing season so far. You got Josh Jacobs up there, but I don't know if people are ready to put Josh Jacobs ahead of Christian McCaffrey. So really, it's tough to go out and trade for the unanimous RB1. And that's what Christian McCaffrey is right now. Even if we didn't see it on a full package yesterday where he was getting 100% of the snaps, we saw a limited role, but we still saw the juice that he added to that offense. So as much as I'd say, yeah, go out and trade for Christian McCaffrey, good luck trying to find somebody who is willing to part with him.
Yeah, this was a guy that he didn't even know the playbook. They were talking about it, that he was just basically tossed out there and they're like, okay, go run this direction, right? Like that's all it really was. And so they were running a lot of JV junior high plays out there, just kind of and he looked great. Like he's still got the juice. There was no question about that. It was kind of be, what's the utilization going to be? And I think the more he gets ingrained into that system, the better he's going to be. So if you have Christian McCaffrey on your fantasy rosters, don't be panicking right now. Hold on to him. And if someone in your league is selling him, I'm perfectly fine going after him, because I mean, that's the kind of player you want to add to your team, someone that's going to change the landscape of your entire league. So we're going to be talking about more players just like that could be changing your team. We're going to do our macro data refinement segment, talking about those trade targets, players we think make the big impact. We're going to look at some waiver wire pickups, the popular players that are out on waivers. You're going to hear a lot of people talking about them. And we're going to do everyone's favorite segment, the Rehab Roundup. That's right. Even without Dr. Vig, we're still doing the Rehab Roundup. But before we get into that, I want to remind you guys, smash that like and subscribe button here on YouTube. Footballguys, man, they have so many great videos, so many great content creators out putting a lot of awesome shows. So subscribe to the Footballguys channel, hit that like button. And if you have any questions going into this next week of fantasy football action, leave them below and I will be getting back to each and every one of those comments and answering your questions. We also have an audio version of this podcast. You can listen to it in the car, listen to it at home, listen to it in the bathroom. I don't really care. I don't judge, man. I listen to podcasts everywhere. Leave a review, 5 stars, and let us know what you like about the show. But Dave, without any further ado, let's get to the Rehab Roundup. All right, welcome into the Rehab Roundup. That's right, Vig ain't here, but the voice is still here. So let's not bury the lead. Man, one of our toughest horses is not looking good. Breece Hall looks like he may have a knee issue.
I just got to say, I know this is a very serious situation and I shouldn't be making light of Breece Hall, but how can I not laugh when you're doing that voice? I don't know how Dr. Vig does it every single week, but, I did defer to Dr. Vig for these answers. I'm a fantasy football analyst and I love diving into the numbers, but when it comes to this, we will defer to the experts. So what Dr. Vig said is that it looks like a likely ACL. That's what we heard from Robert Saleh after the game. And, the Jets can be more competitive next year. And maybe Zach Wilson develops, or they can move on to somebody that is better than him. So I think that there is silver lining here in the fact that next year the Jets are probably going to be a better team. So, it's tough for this season, but going forward, I don't think there's any real concerns about Breece Hall.
The next bad hombre on this list who... Man, he got himself another injury. Dave, this one of your favorite players. Alan
Yeah, Alan
Lazard.
Lazard. He left, came back in, and then left again. The fear right now is that it is a labrum injury. Severity could be all over the place. It could be no time, could be a week, could be 4 weeks. So we still have to wait until we can get an MRI before we can really get the details on this one.
Man, this player, he may have the word calf in his name, but he's a full-bred horse. DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, so the X-rays came back negative, which is pretty promising. We still need an MRI to determine the severity here. What he said is that he felt funny, but he also said that I'm all right. So again, not a whole lot here, but they did come out this morning and said that it wasn't quite as severe as they had initially hoped. So that is promising.
I'm going to break character for just a second because everyone noticed that DK Metcalf once again was on what I'm dubbing the caca cart because everyone thought that he had another bathroom break. And I'm not, once again, we're not trying to make light of the injuries, but sometimes you just have to laugh to keep from crying. And everyone was just like, oh boy, here we go. Another bathroom break. But no, DK Metcalf does have the knee injury. So we'll find out more as we go. All right, back into character. Our next player here, he's a Lion from Detroit, and it's Amon-Ra St.Brown.
Yeah, concussions never a fun thing. He was ruled out almost immediately after going into the blue tent. Probably going to be out for week 8, which would mean that his likely impossible return would be week 9 in a division matchup against the Packers.
Now, fun little side note. Once again, I'm breaking character here because that's what I do when I'm actually analyzing things. Is that could also be the return of another Detroit Lions wide receiver, Jameson Williams, who we have not seen at all this year. So that's going to be a start of a lot of division play for the Lions. 9 weeks of being able to take a lot of time off, rest, rehab, get back in there. Jameson Williams is another player to consider with all the stuff going on with Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, and the injuries surrounding the Lions. Back into character. All right, we got Mike Williams from the Los Angeles Chargers.
So according to Dr. Vig, looks like a high ankle sprain. Luckily, they do have a bye coming up next week, so we'll have some time to rest that up. But he couldn't put any weight on that foot. I'm sure you saw the video where it got twisted completely around. It did not look too good. So we're probably looking, if this is a high ankle sprain, at about 2 to 4 weeks. And those high ankle sprains, I'm sure you have had players before that have had to deal with them. They tend to linger. So 2 to 4 weeks is probably what he's going to miss, but this could be something that could linger all season.
Another ankle injury for a man that is pure muscle and about 10% dreadlocks. David Njoku.
Yeah, and David Njoku, another ankle sprain, but not enough on the tape to determine whether it was a high or a low ankle sprain. But he was seen in a walking boot after the game. Browns are saying that it does not look serious, which is good news. But we just need some more testing on this. Probably out somewhere between 1 to 3 weeks. But like I said, just need some more testing before we can really hammer this one down.
Dave, you did a fantastic job. You don't even have, you're not even a doctor, but you did it. You didn't take what I call the hypocritical oath. I know that's not exactly what it's called, but welcome to the show. I say a lot of stupid things. You did a great job filling in for Dr. Vig there. That is the rehab roundup. Let's get to our popular waiver wire ads going into week 8. All right, Dave, looking at the waiver wire and some of the popular names that I think a lot of people are going to be looking at and a lot of other shows are going to be talking about, I'm just not a fan. I'm not a fan of a lot of these names. And I think that lends even more credence to us talking about trading for players because there's just not a lot out there. The injuries are really taking a toll. And first player I want to take a look at here is Michael Carter, running back for the New York Jets. He's going to become a very popular waiver wire ad with Breece Hall likely done for the season. The Jets have what looked to be the 7th easiest remaining strength of schedule in the season for the running back position. But that really doesn't come into play until much later in the season, okay? His next 3 matchups, he's got New England, talking about some slow pace of play there, good run defense, Buffalo, which we know that nobody can run against Buffalo, and then a bye week. You get 0 points for that, and then they got to play New England again. So we're talking about some really rough matchups for the Jets here. And Dave, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking that the Jets might even just bring someone in. I'm not sure how to value Michael Carter, and he actually might be the best waiver wire ad of the week.
Yeah, and I think you kind of stole my thunder. I think that's just it. I think they're going to bring somebody in. And, I tweeted about this morning, actually, and got a lot of pushback saying, this team isn't even ready to contend for a Super Bowl. Why would they go out and trade for a running back? This is the NFL. This isn't a dynasty league. We don't just have contenders and rebuilders. This is the NFL. And right now they are trying to shift the culture in New York. And I think they're doing a great job of it. I mean, they're 5-2 right now. They're coming in off some pretty big wins. I mean, may not be the biggest and fiercest opponents, but they're winning. And I think they want to keep that going. So we've got a lot of big names right now that are on the trade block, David Montgomery and Cam Akers and Kareem Hunt. And then even if they want to go back for somebody a little bit cheaper, Jeff Wilson Jr., Tevin Coleman, there's a lot of people available that I think are going to get brought in. At the end of the day, really like Michael Carter, but I think that he is more of a complementary piece, just 200 pounds. I don't know if he's going to be able to stand up for a full workload for the rest of the season. So I'm right there with you. I like Michael Carter, the talent, but I don't think that he is going to step into the role where he's going to see 20 touches a week. The realistic scenario is that somebody else is going to come in. He's going to be splitting touches, and I don't know if there's all that much value there for the rest of the season.
Yeah, this is a run scheme that they can kind of make it work with whoever's back there. So Michael Carter, he's probably going to be in some sort of a 3-man rotation, similar to what we saw last year. Ty Johnson's getting a role back in there again, and we've seen so many teams just grab players off the street. Latavius Murray and Tevin Coleman being shipped around, and Marlon Mack hasn't done anything, but he's been on like 5 different teams this year. So it's like a new running back is probably going to be there. Let's talk about another guy who just came back from injury, who we have not seen in, it just feels like years. And it's Gus Edwards, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. Davis, TLC would say, don't go chasing waterfalls. And I'm going to suggest to everyone here is do not go chasing the touchdowns. Don't blow all your fab on Gus Edwards. In my opinion, this looks to be another 3-man rotation. None of these running backs caught a single pass in this game. Edwards, 38% of the rushing attempts out of these running backs in the next 3 games. Tampa Bay, tough run defense. New Orleans, tough run defense. And then a bye week. I'm not super excited about Gus Edwards. And I think a lot of people are going to go out there and blow their fab on this guy.
Yeah, and when you say a 3-headed monster, I assume that you are alluding to Gus Edwards, Kenyon Drake, and Justice Hill. But you didn't even talk about Lamar Jackson, who's going to siphon, 10 carries for himself and some of the goal line work. So I am with you. And right now, people are going to see that final box score and that fantasy production, and they're going to say, I need to go out and get me some Gus Edwards. But at the end of the day, those splits, those snaps were split almost identically 3 ways. I mean, everybody was getting their touches. Gus Edwards just so happened to be the one that fell into the end zone twice. But good luck predicting who that running back is going to be. Next week, Justice Hill might have a 2-touchdown week. I mean, we're just a few weeks removed from J.K. Dobbins having a 2-touchdown week. So I am with you. I'm trying to avoid this backfield. I'll let somebody else go and spend a bunch of money on Gus Edwards, plug him into the lineup, and have this crazy high variance week to week. But I think that what we saw yesterday was pretty darn close to his ceiling game. I don't think we're going to see a lot of times where he's going to be putting up 20 plus points in a single week.
TLC, the philosophers, the modern philosophers of fantasy football. Don't go chasing waterfalls. Going from one split backfield to another one, Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. Listen, I have a little bit to apologize for, because on Twitter, I called them gas station sushi. That it's basically, you only eat that if you're about to die. And yeah, they just both went out and played fantastic. But I think there's a little bit of the underlying stuff to look at there. It wasn't really, no one really got the lion's share of the carries. No one really stood out to be better than the other. There is the injury now with Chuba Hubbard. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just, I mean, they got shredded. I don't know. It was a weird week of fantasy football. But the Panthers actually have one of the easiest schedules remaining for the season for running backs. The next 3 games, they've got Atlanta, Cincinnati, Atlanta again. So going into that fantasy playoffs, it gets really easy for them. Dave, where do you sit with these Carolina Panthers running backs? Are either of them rosterable or startable for you?
Yeah, I mean, we should have seen it coming last week when you're one of the worst teams in the NFL and you're rolling out 2 running backs against one of the stoutest rushing defenses in the NFL. You just got to play both running backs. I mean, that's just obviously I'm being sarcastic here. I don't know what the heck happened in that game, but yeah, looking at both of these guys on the waiver wire, I'm kind of with you. I'm not especially interested in either of them. I also don't know if you saw the report coming out of the Carolina beat, but it looks like they have committed to PJ Walker being the quarterback going forward. So just a weird situation in Carolina. If I had to pick one of the two, I am a fan of Deonta Foreman. I think that he's just slightly more talented. I was a big fan of Deonta Foreman when he came into the league, and then an Achilles injury set him back. We saw him last year get some opportunity in Tennessee and looked pretty good with it. And I think that he looked like the better runner yesterday. Chuba Hubbard had a nice breakaway run where he got out in space and picked up some yards. But really, I think Deonta Foreman was more the engine that was powering this running game. He should have had a touchdown, but he took it all the way down into scoring territory where Chuba Hubbard was able to punch it in. But if I had to pick one of the two between Foreman and Hubbard, I'm going to lean ever so slightly towards Deonta Foreman. But he's a guy that I really probably don't want to spend more than 5 to 10% of my fab on, and that's only if I'm hurting at running back.
Let's get to our next player here, and it's a guy that I think we've all wanted to pick up. We've all been waiting for him to be good at football and help our fantasy football teams, and it's Parris Campbell. And it just feels like year after year and week after week, we're always waiting for that breakout. And I'm still very weary. It looks like it's finally happening. I don't know. He's having the best season of his career so far, which, I mean, it's not saying much. He just literally had to be active. But over the last 2 weeks, 17 receptions, 127 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 20 targets. He's getting involved in this passing game, whether Matt Ryan has looked good or bad, whether Michael Pittman has been involved, even with Alec Pierce being involved. It just seems like Parris Campbell is starting to carve out a role. So is this one of those guys that you kind of want to be ahead of the curve? Or is this one of those, I'd rather let someone else pick up that grenade and let it just explode on their team?
This is tough because over the offseason, I swore myself off Parris Campbell. I said, this guy's been burning me year after year after year. No matter what he shows this year, I'm not buying back into Parris Campbell. But I think I might be buying back into Parris Campbell. I mean, he's looked pretty good these last couple of weeks. We've always been a fan of the talent. The only thing that's ever set him back are injuries. And, at this point, most teams are probably doing okay with wide receivers. I know last week was brutal with bye weeks, but if you're in a league where you got to start 3 wide receivers or you got multiple flex spots, I think he's worth a pickup. But this is still Michael Pittman's team. The passing game is going to run through him. Alec Pierce and Parris Campbell, I think they're going to alternate, being the number 2 option on the team based off of who they're playing against. So I do like Parris Campbell, big fan of the talent, but I don't know if he's going to be a plug-and-play wide receiver going forward. He's somebody that you can pick up, stash, and use as a desperation play during bye weeks, but I'm not expecting too much.
And we'll get to these last 2 players pretty quickly because I don't think there's a whole lot of debate or analysis to go in here, but it's Evan Engram at tight end. And people still hate Evan Engram. I don't understand. But with the injuries to David Njoku and with how bad the tight end position has been, you can't count on guys like Dalton Schultz who have been in and out of lineups. Evan Engram, he's got some good matchups coming up over the next couple weeks. Denver, Las Vegas, Kansas City. And over the last 3 games, Evan Engram, 15 receptions on 23 targets. He's averaging 5 receptions per game over that span. He's averaging 11 PPR points per game over that span. That kind of production puts him in the talk to be a top 8 tight end, top 10 tight end every single week. And considering the market, in this economy, you can't turn your nose up at that, man. Like Evan Engram should be rostered. And I was checking because I have David Njoku. I got to go out and grab Evan Engram. Dave, what do you think about Engram?
Yeah, I think that there's, 2 different archetypes of tight ends that I want on my team. You want those guys that can rack up, big plays after the catch and really break fantasy football on a week-to-week basis. And that's obviously your Travis Kelce's and your Mark Andrews and Darren Wallers and guys like that. But then you've also got David Njoku, who's a great athlete and can do things like that. And then you've got your other set of tight ends that aren't the sexiest players. They're probably never going to have a 25 or a 30-point week throughout the season, but give you a moderately safe floor. And that's where Evan Engram is right now. I mean, like you said, he's been getting the targets. He's seen 6+ targets in 3 consecutive weeks. We know that Doug Peterson loves his tight ends. Even Sam Darnold has been getting more involved in the passing game. So yeah, I'm completely on board with Evan Engram right now as a top 10 tight end. Things change quickly in the tight end landscape, but you can pick him up and start him as soon as next week if you're in pinch.
I think you meant Dan Arnold playing tight end, not Sam Darnold.
Arnold, not Sam Darnold. Yes.
I feel like you're not really a fantasy analyst until you've made that slip up at least once. So yeah,
this is my 3rd or 4th time at least.
All right, let's get to our last guy here, and it's my boy Vanilla Vic, Daniel Jones. Oh my gosh, what kind of season is this? This is crazy. That he is a top 10 fantasy quarterback right now. Daniel Jones, he's got the 2nd most rushing yards amongst QBs, 49 rushing yards per game. Guess that's more than Jalen Hurts. Like, I can't even get the words out because it's just so crazy that he's been this good. He actually has the easiest remaining strength of schedule amongst fantasy quarterbacks. And over the next few weeks, he's got Seattle, which has been really helpful for points, going up against Houston, another bad defense, Detroit, another bad defense. They have a bye mixed in there, but Daniel Jones is a legit starting fantasy quarterback, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't want to say that Daniel Jones is the next Josh Allen because that's just absolutely crazy. But there was a point in time where Josh Allen was written off as a bust. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. Brian Daboll showed up and turned him into the Josh Allen that we know and love today. I'm not saying that is going to happen with Daniel Jones, but the ceiling is there and he's looking good. So yeah, go out and pick up Daniel Jones, start him with confidence next week.
All right, there are popular waiver wire ads for the week. Let's get to our macro data refinement and talk to you guys about some trade targets that we think can help you win a fantasy football championship.
Macro data refinement.
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 All right, Dave. So when we take a look at these trade targets, we don't just want to say, "Hey, go and trade for this guy because we think he's really good," right? We pride ourselves here at the Pretend GM is kind of being the show that teaches a man to fish, not just here's your fish. So we want to talk about why, how we're doing this stuff, right? So when you're going to make a trade and you're doing this, I always just want to remind people: don't make offers on a whim. Don't just do it because you're panicking. Don't trade up based on emotion. A lot of players say, "Well, I really like this guy. Like this is the guy I've been standing him really hard." Like, listen, I love Ken Walker. And I've put some feelers out there. After this week, it's impossible. I'd have to probably give them my house and my wife to get Ken Walker, and that's probably not going to happen. I could be talked into it. But listen, you want to take the emotion out of the trades, and I think that when you're looking for the trade target, it's be as calculated as possible. You want to take calculated risks here. It's players with decent floors that you say, okay, the situation around them has maybe caused them to not perform as best as they can. But we can see the forest through the trees. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel, all the other isms that you want to use there. Do they have that league winning upside? Can they change the outcome for my team going forward, right? Dave, what's one of the biggest things that you look for when doing a trade in your league?
Well, I just talked about this recently. I put out a Twitter thread and it got a decent amount of traction. But for me, especially at this point in the year, everybody's just saying, here's the guys you should be going out and trading for. And I think that there's so much more nuance to it. And really, it starts with where your team is at. If you're 0-6 right now, you should be taking those home run swings. I'm not a believer in Cam Akers, but if I'm 0-6, I will go out and buy low on Cam Akers on the hope that he ends up in Buffalo and can turn my season around. So I think that depending on where you are, you should be making different moves. If you're 6-0, 7-0, congratulations, your team is killing it right now. Go out and grab Jameson Williams because you can take some L's over the next few weeks and potentially plug in a wide receiver 1 when Jameson Williams comes back. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is targeting different people depending on the situation that my team is currently in.
All right, so we're going to get to our first trade target right here. It's a guy with massive, massive potential, and it just doesn't seem like he's reached it yet. But Dave, you believe that Justin Fields is ascending and he is on the way up to be the next, big fantasy quarterback. Talk to me about Justin Fields.
Yeah, so I was, really touting Justin Fields a lot this offseason. And anybody that pays attention to the Footballguys YouTube channel has already seen me talking about Justin Fields ad nauseum at this point. But it seems like we are finally starting to see things come together a little bit in Chicago. And of course, the Bears are playing tonight. They're going up against New England, and Bill Belichick has a penchant for just destroying young quarterbacks. So there might be an opportunity tomorrow morning to buy even lower on Justin Fields than you can right now. But there's no surprise about it. I mean, to start the season, things were bleak for Justin Fields. He was a QB 31 through the first 4 weeks. And I mean, it was just an anemic offense that the Bears were running. And we saw the same thing last year where Matt Nagy was just running a very short-leashed offense for Justin Fields and wasn't really doing much. They weren't winning games. It wasn't helping him out in fantasy. And then we saw this change after a few starts where Matt Nagy kind of said, let's let him run and see what happens. And he had 23 rushing attempts over a 2-week period. And during those 2 weeks, he was the QB3 in scoring. I'm not going to sit here and bore you with the numbers about how a rushing quarterback can elevate the floor and the ceiling. You should know that by now. We learned that back when Tim Tebow was a starter. We saw it with Deshaun Watson and Jalen Hurts. Doesn't matter how many games
I was not expecting a Tim Tebow drop today on the show. Thank you. I like the surprise.
I try to keep people on their toes here. But yes, I mean, we know when you run the ball, you put up a lot of fantasy points. And we have seen him run the ball a lot over the last 2 weeks. He's been unleashed for 18 rushing attempts for 148 yards. And while the fantasy production hasn't completely been there, he's the QB 10 over the last 2 weeks. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about this, QB 10, not all that exciting, but he has left a ton of points on the board as well. We all saw that Thursday night game where he threw a touchdown up to Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney juggled it, came just short of the goal line. That points left on the board. The week before that, a 52-yard touchdown was called back on a pretty iffy block in the back call. So let's just take that 52-yard touchdown run, tack that onto the numbers he's put up for the last 2 weeks. He would be the QB3 behind Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. So we are one weird penalty away from Justin Fields putting up elite fantasy production. So you can go out and get him now for cheap. I don't know if he is going to be a plug-and-play QB1, but the ceiling is there. And after this week, he's got New England tonight, which is going to be tough. He's got Dallas next week, which is going to be tough. And then Miami, Detroit, Atlanta. His schedule opens up a little bit, and he could be a guy that can give you immense upside down the stretch.
It's been interesting. In years past, you don't normally go out and trade for quarterbacks because it's kind of set, right? Like the good guys were good, the bad guys were bad, and everyone in between was the streamer, right? But this is the year where a lot of the good guys have not been good. Tom Brady, Matt Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, like good quarterbacks have not been good. I have Justin Herbert, and I went and invested in him thinking that's going to give me a good quarterback advantage over everyone else, and it has not really, unless you have Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen. You're still considering different quarterbacks. So yeah, I like this idea of going out and getting a guy that has big time potential for not only just the long ball, but man, that rushing ability is just so exciting with Justin Fields. I'm going to get to my first player here, and it's a wide receiver, a rookie, Drake London, wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. And boy, we have seen his value just kind of plummet over the last few weeks, and no lower than this last week, where 1 reception on 1 target. That's all we saw for Drake London. And listen, it's been 2 horrible weeks back to back. I think we're going to start to see some regression to the mean, right? Regression is not always a bad thing. You get that positive regression back to the mean. He started off so well. He started his career averaging nearly 8 targets per game over the first 5 games. And then last 2 games, it's been 5 targets total. It just has not looked good for him and the Atlanta Falcons. But he's still, and this is, target share bros are probably sitting there saying, bro, but he's got that 30% target share, man. Like, he does. But 30% target share doesn't really mean a whole lot in this Atlanta Falcons offense. And so what we are looking for here is a team that's likely going to have to change their offense up a little bit. Okay. What they've been doing is playing a lot of keep away. They've been going up against some, relatively good offensive teams, talking about, or at least teams that were expected to be good offensively: Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Cincinnati. So what does Arthur Smith want to do? He wants to run that ball. He doesn't want to keep the ball in the hands of Marcus Mariota for too much. He wants to try to control the clock. And I think they're going to end up in a lot more competitive games going forward. They've got Carolina twice. They've got the Chargers, who have been surprisingly not that great. A lot of injuries in that team. Chicago, Washington, Pittsburgh. There's going to be some more competitive games here with some teams that don't really have the best secondaries. So Drake London, this is the lowest you're going to be able to get him throughout the season. I can't imagine it gets any lower than just 1 catch, right? So this is a guy that I really do like his potential going forward. And Falcons have the easiest remaining strength of schedule for the regular season and fantasy playoffs for the wide receiver position. So Drake London, I think, is a really, really nice buy low candidate this time that could really change the landscape of your fantasy football team. Dave, let's get to your second player. It's another rookie wide receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants.
Oh, man, we finally saw it last week, right? We saw that usage finally yesterday, because I wrote about Wan'Dale Robinson last week. And if you go to my Twitter, it is currently my pinned tweet, a quick little video that I did on him. I mean, I just love this kid, and he's in a perfect situation. The Giants right now are 6-1, which is mind-blowing. Like, I can't even believe those words are coming out of my mouth. And they've been doing it by hanging in some pretty close games and scratching out some gritty wins. Because on offense, they don't have a powerhouse offense. I mean, the offense right now is Saquon Barkley and then Daniel Jones occasionally ripping off a run and picking up a first down here. But there has been no offensive playmaker alongside Saquon Barkley. And, at some point, somebody's going to have to step up, or they're just going to start putting 11 men in the box on every single play. And I think that Wan'Dale Robinson could be that guy. I mean, Kenny Golladay is dust. Sterling Shepard's year is over.
Dust is putting it nicely.
To put it nicely, yeah. And Kadarius Toney, I'm convinced he's an urban myth at this point. I mean, I haven't seen him on the field doing anything. I think he's logged 35 snaps all season. I mean, the team's been relying on David Sills and Marcus Johnson and Darius Slayton and Richie James. These are real names. Like, this isn't a random name generator that I just came up with. These are NFL players who have been drawing meaningful targets for the Giants. So we saw it last week because he came back from an injury. Very limited last week, but he was demanding a ton of targets when he was on the field. And I can bore you with all the efficiency metrics, targets per route run and route participation rate and all that.
Nerd.
I'll just promise you it was good. It was good. It was very, very elite. And we saw it on 23% of the snaps. And then last week, all of a sudden, he steps into a bigger role, plays 80-something% of the snaps. He saw his route participation rate go up, still maintained all of his efficiency metrics. And while he was unable to score, that might kind of be a blessing, because you can probably go out and still acquire him for cheap. Had he scored and had 100 yards last week, it would have been really tough to go out and get Wan'Dale Robinson. But make no doubt about it, he is the wide receiver 1 on this team already, even if he hasn't put up the production yet. So I think that you can still get him for relatively cheap. Huge fan of the talent, and really just the narrative of them needing somebody to step up to play alongside Saquon Barkley. I think he's set for a fantasy explosion down the stretch.
Yeah, by the way, going back and looking at what Daniel Jones has done with the slot wide receiver position over the years, Sterling Shepard walked so that Wan'Dale Robinson could run. Okay, throughout his career, Sterling Shepard with Daniel Jones averaged 8 targets per game, 5 receptions, and a little over 50 yards. So you're looking at basically a guy in Wan'Dale Robinson who can be a locked and loaded wide receiver 3 for you each week, giving you 11 to 13, maybe even more PPR points. He's kind of built the same way Curtis Samuel and Deebo Samuel are. He's going to, be running the ball probably a little bit on some manufactured touches. And really, with how good this Giants team has been staying in games and him being that wide receiver 1 for this team, he's going to have scoring opportunities. So this is a guy that, we talk about that floor being at the wide receiver 3 kind of locked and loaded, but there's going to be some weeks where he gives you some major upside. Dave, I really, really like that call. Now I'm going to go from a younger wide receiver to kind of an older wide receiver that, man, I think a lot of people are assuming that the sun is setting on this guy. It's Keenan Allen, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think so much of it is just becoming that recency bias where we just haven't seen him for a long time. And then now after this week where he came back and was supposedly healthy and ready to play and good to go, and he wasn't. He was on a pitch count and he didn't really play a whole lot. And I think that is going to upset the Keenan Allen manager a lot in your league. And this is going to be that time where that person that's been waiting for him to come back, they're just going to be so frustrated and want to just get rid of them. Fantasy football is so much of a what have you done for me lately type of league. And now the Chargers go into a bye. Bye week managers always panic and make moves that they think they have to. Listen, for all intents and purposes, Keenan Allen should not have played this week. But for those of you looking to go out and acquire him, it's almost good that he did, because now his perceived value has dropped even a little bit more. But going forward, just kind of like Drake London having that great schedule going forward, the Chargers have the second easiest schedule for wide receivers. And now we've got Mike Williams dealing with a high ankle sprain. That kind of stuff lingers. We saw it last year with Jerry Jeudy, where he was not right for a long time. It took 6, 7, 8 weeks, and he still really was never himself. So we could see something similar with a guy like Mike Williams, who so much of his production is predicated on his explosive ability. Keenan Allen is not typically an injury risk. Does he sometimes have the questionable tag? Sure, but he's missed just 2 games over the last 5 seasons. Okay, that's counting this game that he actually played, but for the most part, over the last 5 seasons, Keenan Allen has been really, really good. He's been a top 14 PPR wide receiver in each of the last 5 seasons or better, averaged 10 targets per game and 6 touchdowns throughout each of those 5 seasons. This is a guy who is just consistently really, really good as a wide receiver 1 or just beneath that in your lineups. And one thing that we've seen with the Los Angeles Chargers, Justin Herbert has not looked comfortable lately. And NFL quarterbacks are just like the rest of us, only just like a lot more talented, and they have a lot more money, but they seek comfort. Okay. They seek comfort. And now that he's assumed no longer dealing with this rib injury, he's getting back his favorite target, Keenan Allen. Coming off this bye week, we have to assume they are going to find good creative ways to utilize him and get the ball into Keenan Allen's hands, because this Chargers offense has been stagnant. Justin Herbert has a lot less time to throw with his injuries to his offensive line. He's going to be getting that ball out quick to Keenan Allen, avoid some more of those hits, keep those ribs nice and healthy. And man, I really like the idea of Keenan Allen going forward, because I think that we've seen what he's been able to do in the past. And man, this is a guy that he gives you a pretty good ceiling going forward. All right, Dave.
I don't have any pushback there. I just want to say, last night I was sitting on my phone at like 10 p.m. sending trade offers out for Keenan Allen and just thinking, am I buying low on a really talented wide receiver, or am I the sucker that's just taking on a 30-year-old? But I'm with you. Yeah, I'm sending offers out for Keenan Allen as well. I just feel like once he steps back into that offense, everything is going to start humming again for the Chargers.
And you know what? And I don't know if there's any logic that can tell you one way or another, right? Like, you're going to have that in the back of your head. Did I just buy in on a 30-year-old coming off a hamstring injury like this? He may be done, but that's the point of doing these trades. There's always going to be a risk, but we're taking a calculated risk on a guy who could absolutely change the landscape of your team. Dave, let's talk about another. Rookie wide receivers all over this list, but we're talking about another one. It is George Pickens, wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, and I feel like I might kind of be taking the cop out here by just going with all of these young, rookies and year 2 guys, but those are the guys that we see get better as the season goes on. And I think right now, George Pickens still kind of leaves this weird taste in people's mouths, and I think it's because of his season-long numbers, but I just think those are so deceiving, because really it has been a tale of 2 seasons for George Pickens. We've got the Mitch Trubisky era, and we have the Kenny Pickett era, and Pickens' role in each of those eras could not be more different. When Mitch Trubisky was under center, Pickens was averaging 4 targets per game, never eclipsed 40 yards in a single outing, never scored a touchdown. Then Pickens came in, and George Pickens had his first 100-yard game in the season. We all saw that when he took over at halftime. Pickett, from halftime through the end of the game, was just hyper-targeting George Pickens, and we finally saw that George Pickens breakout. The very next week, Pickett plays again. 8 targets, 6 receptions, 83 yards. Pretty good for George Pickens. And then they went back to Mitch Trubisky. And what did we see? 3 catches, 27 yards. Back to Pickett yesterday and 61 yards and a touchdown. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but he has not been able to surpass 40 yards in a single game with Mitch Trubisky, and he has had a minimum of 60 yards in every single game with Kenny Pickett. And we see this a lot. 2 young guys that are getting a lot of reps together in camp, build a strong chemistry with each other, and then it translates onto the football field. So it's obvious right now that Mitch Trubisky probably isn't going to be getting many starts going forward, unless there's an injury to Kenny Pickett. So with Kenny Pickett being the presumed starter for the rest of the season, him clearly favoring George Pickens, I just think that there's an opportunity to buy a ascending star. I mean, we know George Pickens could have been a first-round talent if it weren't for the ACL tear and some of the character concerns. He has all of the makings to be an alpha wide receiver. Big, tall, fast, and amazing at contested catches. So Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, they're not going to suddenly just disappear, but I think that Pickens is good enough, and that rapport that he has with Kenny Pickett, that he can ascend atop the pecking order and be the wide receiver one for the Steelers for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think there was some players, Dave, and you kind of touched on this, is like there are guys that it just goes beyond the data, right? The macro data refinement and all of the looking at the stats and looking at the fantasy points. And there are just players that are really, really good. And you want to have that early mover advantage. And we've seen it. I think the biggest thing is that split between getting the passes from Kenny Pickett versus getting those passes from Mitch Trubisky. And, Pickett to Pickens has become a real thing. That touchdown that he caught last night against my Miami Dolphins was so impressive. And man, I was one Jalen Waddle reception away from hitting on my 5-leg parlay. I was so upset, but George Pickens looked so great last night. And yes, he's another guy that I think continues to have that really high ceiling. This rookie class was really impressive. It was so much better than I think a lot of people made it out to be. And each year we just keep getting spoiled with how good these rookies are. Let's get to our next player here. And the next guy I've got is Chris Godwin, wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I don't know that there's a team in the NFL lower than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now. And even their coach, Todd Bowles, has said, this is dark times for us, man. Like, pretty dramatic. But I think all of us would have said before this weekend, it was the Carolina Panthers that were the worst team in the NFL. And they went out there, and I was live prior to, the games on Sunday saying, man, this game could be a boat race. I didn't realize which direction it would be in. And the Buccaneers just got, to use a fun term, mollywopped out there by the Carolina Panthers. And listen, I think what we're seeing here is worst case scenario. We are seeing the bottom floor of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I know you're not supposed to say it can't get any worse, but I actually don't think it can get any worse for them. It's really bad right now. Chris Godwin has been the wide receiver 21 in PPR scoring since week 4. And that's the floor that you're getting with him. That's basically the trade that you're making, is to go and get a guy who's borderline low wide receiver 2. But he's going to give you that potential of being that top 12 guy throughout the rest of the year. When you take a look at the peripherals and what you've seen here, 41 targets in 4 games. I mean, do the quick math. You don't even need the calculator. It's just over 10 targets per game. He's actually got 4 more targets than Mike Evans, the perceived wide receiver 1 on that team, despite running 23 less routes than him. So Godwin is becoming the guy that Tom Brady's looking for. And, we talk about Justin Herbert needing that comfort and looking for a guy like Keenan Allen. It's a very similar situation with Chris Godwin. And Brady, he's a quarterback that absolutely throughout his whole career has sought comfort. Chris Godwin, one of the big things that stands out to me is 0 touchdowns in the season. Tom Brady has just 2 passing touchdowns over the last 3 weeks. We talk about that regression to the mean, things that should change going forward. That is one that, I mean, if you're going to bet on something, you're going to bet on the greatest quarterback of all time to start throwing some touchdowns at some point, considering all the talent he has around them. And we look at one of the most respected names in the fantasy football industry, Rich Rebar. He just tweeted this out this morning. The Bucs have scored on just 13% of their drives. That is 3rd worst in the league. They're right there with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Denver Broncos, who have been absolutely atrocious. So you have to think going forward that is going to get better. It's at that point, there's not really the data to support it. It's just the logic. Best quarterback of all time, an offense with so many weapons. It's got to get better than this. It has to. Yeah, Russell Gage with his hamstring injury, Julio Jones, who's been really just non-existent. He's kind of like Kadarius Toney. He's an urban legend. They've got some pretty solid opponents coming up soon. Looking at Baltimore Ravens, the Los Angeles Rams, New Orleans Saints, Carolina Panthers, again, all 4 of those teams are in the bottom 9 in the league versus fantasy wide receivers. So Chris Godwin does have a good outlook going forward. I think you can get him for relatively cheap, and that ceiling for Godwin, it's just another one of those guys that has a league-winning factor if those touchdowns start to kick in for Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dave, let's get to your last trade target on the show, and it's Travis Etienne, running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, and all I'll say real quickly is injuries are the only thing that have been holding Chris Godwin back. Ever since Tom Brady showed up to Tampa Bay, it has been one injury after another. Concussion, hamstring sprain, broken finger, foot injury, ACL. I mean, it has just been one injury after another. I'm with you, though. I think that he is the wide receiver 1 in Tampa Bay, and if you can go out and get him for anything less than a wide receiver 1 price tag, you've won. So love that call out, Alfredo. But yeah, Travis Etienne. And really, you're probably saying, why would I go out and trade for Travis Etienne? You know, he's coming off his first 100-yard game of the season. James Robinson had 0 touches last week. I'm not going to buy high on a player. Well, I don't think you could buy high enough on Travis Etienne, because right now, you know, we look at his value is going up and we might be buying him right here, but I think he's still got a long way to go. I mean, this kid is a phenomenal athlete. And I've been talking about this all season, is that the writing has been on the wall for a change of guard to happen in Jacksonville. And if you just look at all of the numbers, I mean, all of the efficiency metrics are favoring Travis Etienne. There isn't one efficiency metric that you can use to paint a picture that James Robinson is the better running back right now, whether it's rushing yards over expectation per attempt, broken tackles, breakaway run rate, you name it. Travis Etienne has been the substantially better running back. And now, this is no disrespect to James Robinson. I think James Robinson is a great player, you know, came from Illinois State, go Birds, got a ton of friends that went to Illinois State, love to see him come into the league undrafted and have 2 great seasons. But we kind of see this all the time with these rebuilding teams where they get a guy with little to no draft capital and they give him a ton of touches during that rebuilding phase. Remember Jordan Howard? We just talked about Michael Carter a little bit earlier. And I think James Robinson is kind of just another one of those guys where he got great volume and he was good with that volume over the 2-year period. But then when the team decides we are no longer rebuilding and we want to push towards contention, and the team did that by drafting Trevor Lawrence first overall, then they go out and they draft another running back that replaces that guy. Like Jordan Howard was replaced by David Montgomery, like Michael Carter was replaced by Breece Hall. We are seeing James Robinson get replaced by Travis Etienne, who is a true 3-down, do-it-all back. Right now, he ranks 2nd in the league in rushing yards over expectation per attempt, behind only your boy, Kenneth Walker. I mean, both of these guys are guys that I could not pay enough for. They have RB1 overall potential. I think their floor is back-end RB1 going forward. So I am now just lumping this into a Travis Etienne and Kenneth Walker conversation, but 2 young, amazing players that you cannot pay up for enough right now.
Yeah, when it comes to Travis Etienne, I don't even think you need the data to tell you anything. Just flip on 5 minutes of a Jaguars game. Trevor Lawrence is always looking his way. Travis Etienne is easily the most talented player on the Jaguars roster. They're going to continue to use him. Now, a guy that I think that kind of possesses that same ceiling and he's maybe like a step ahead of Travis Etienne. This is our last player in the trade target conversation, and it's DeAndre Swift. Okay. There's been a little bit of theme of players coming back from injuries. And listen, I was touting Travis Etienne all offseason because I felt like he has a lot of the same toolbox as DeAndre Swift. And he could be that guy that gives you the good receiving floor and just the explosive breakaway runs. And this is going to be the lowest asking price that you can acquire DeAndre Swift for in this season. Okay. We talk about going out there and making the big moves that are going to change your fantasy football team, help you win in the playoffs, help you win that championship. DeAndre Swift is it. You take a look at the running back landscape right now. And I mean, now we're talking about how Travis Etienne and Ken Walker are the big names to own in fantasy. And that's not where we were just 3 weeks ago. It's crazy how much it has changed. Players are getting hurt. There's not much left out there. If you can go out and acquire a top 8, top 5 even running back at such a low value right now, DeAndre Swift is one of those guys that I absolutely love to go out and put a trade offer out there for. He wasn't playing in week 7, and it wasn't even a setback. It was more just an abundance of caution from the Detroit Lions, who they tend to do that, especially when you have a guy like Jamal Williams who can just go out there and play. So the Lions are actually one of the better teams in the league when it comes to running the football. We all know they have that great offensive line, and that defense has still not improved. They are still worse in the league. It really plays to DeAndre Swift's strengths. He's going to continue to be used in the passing game. And don't look now, but I mean, we're starting to see Jared Goff kind of turn, not kind of, but he's turned into a pumpkin, right? And you can tell, we talk about quarterbacks needing to be comfortable. Nothing has made him more comfortable than having Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift out there. And those are the guys that he's been missing. And so when DeAndre Swift gets back out onto that field, I'm expecting him to continue to catch that ball. He's averaged 6 targets and 4.5 receptions over his career with Jared Goff at quarterback. Those are easy points to get every single week. You're talking about a guy that has a floor of giving you 13, 14 PPR points each week. But by the way, this season, he was averaging 17 PPR points per game, despite leaving early in week 3 with his injury. So you're talking about a guy that if he's continuing down this road, and, we can coulda, woulda, shoulda with all that, but he's a guy that if he continues down that road, you're talking about a top 5 PPR running back in fantasy football. He has been absolutely crushing the over and expected fantasy points per game. He is listed alongside players like Cooper Kupp, Nick Chubb, Stephon Diggs, all guys that you probably can't go out and trade for because they are so valuable to the fantasy manager that rosters them. DeAndre Swift is that guy that because of missing so much time and because of that frustrated fantasy manager, you can probably go out and get him. I absolutely love sending out an offer for DeAndre Swift. Dave, we did it. We did it. We talked about all of our trade targets that can help you win your league. Now, guys, all you got to do is go out there and start making some offers. That is it for us. Dave, I want to thank you so much for joining me. This was so much fun, man. You're not Vig, but you might even be better. I don't know. I don't know.
I would never take that from Vig.
Thank you guys so much for listening all the way through. Remember, smash that like and subscribe button here on YouTube. Follow everything that Footballguys has coming out each week. So much great content, so many great people giving you all the best analysis. And like I mentioned, if you have a question for this week's fantasy football action, go ahead and drop it in the comments below, and I will be answering each and every single one of them personally. Don't forget, we have that audio version of the show where you can leave a review, give us 5 stars, and let us know what you like about the show. It means so much to us. For myself, for Dave Kluge, and for the absent Dr. Vig, adios.